It is on your good side.
Right.
You able to hear?
I don't have sound on. I can turn it on.
Could you real quick? Hey everybody, could someone put in chat that you can hear me?
This is a on YouTube, and it hasn't started. It says starting soon.
You have the link
Did I
for
get the
the.
wrong link?
Maybe do another link.
Let's see.
Um,
Tonight.
there it is.
There it is. Okay. Can I have sound?
Hey everybody. Okay. That's the so the YouTube's a little delayed.
You know what? Yeah, when Andy does that, it is.
Okay. So we are here with Sean Smith of Solar City, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about solar, and then take some Q&A from our rather large audience, as well as from you online. So Sean, the light's hitting you real nice. So you're up.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me out here, Jason. And a little bit about Solar City, first of all. A lot of people don't know one company from another, but solar goes back to the 50s when Bell Laboratories actually created the technology for those panels. What was going on until about the middle of last decade was you needed to have a lot of capital to put some panels on your roof. And the payback was usually pretty decent, usually less than 15 years, so somebody had a lot of capital. At the time, they were going to see the investment pay off. But a couple of cousins of Elon Musk got together and decided there's got to be a better way to make it accessible to every person. So they were fortunately friends with the Googles and the Intels and the eBays, and they were able to find a lot of venture capital money. And they came up with a new way to buy solar. Think of it like another utility company besides who you have now, just cheaper. So most of our customers that qualify, they have no out-of-pocket expenses, and they're able to pay just like they pay now for the utility bill, just like they pay now. The best part is really they control it. They lock in that rate. Some people lock in at a 2.9, some people lock in at a 0 rate. It just depends on how they want to structure it. Elon Musk, in case you don't know, is the founder of PayPal, sold that to eBay, took the capital from that and started Tesla Motors and SpaceX. He also was the cousin to the two founders that started Solar City. His Tesla is based on the ability to have clean, renewable energy for those battery packs. He's going to be starting a gigapack factory here in the next year with companies like Panasonic. We've heard rumors of other companies like Apple and Sony. And so far, we are building all of the supercharging stations for his Teslas. So someday you may be able to drive up and down the 41, the 99, the 5, just pull into a gas station looking place that's not a gas station, swap out the old battery, put in a brand new one, and be on your way to 200, 250 mile range, whatever the electric car is going to deliver at that point. So feel free to throw any questions to me. I'll do the best I can to answer. And then
I've got a few queued up, but do either of you have a quick question to start us off?
Go ahead. Someone will jump in.
Okay. So one of the first questions I'm seeing here is, can you explain solar tax credits?
Yes. So right now the federal government has a 30% federal tax credit. 30% applies to a few other areas of energy efficiency as well, and solar is one of them. So let's say that you bought a $30,000 solar system from Solar City or any other company. You're going to be eligible to receive that 30% or $9,000 as a tax credit, not a rebate, the following year that it was installed. So if we install it this year on your 2015 taxes, you'd be eligible to apply that 30% tax credit. Let's say that you are retired and have zero tax liability. That 30% will not help you whatsoever. So it's very important that when we go out and meet with customers to educate them, that they understand it's not a rebate, but a true tax credit. So if they don't have the liability, it will not benefit them. What if they only have a $4,500 tax liability? Well, then we are able to carry that over to the next year. Here's the gray area. That expires in 2016. We don't know in the industry, and Congress hasn't made a decision yet, what's going to happen after 2016. Will they renew it? Will it stay at 30%? Will it possibly drop to 10%, which is what the commercial tax credit will be after 2016? So at that point, we don't know. We also don't know if they'll let you continue to roll it over after 2016. So let's say you only had a $1,000 tax liability, meaning it would take you 9 years to recoup that $9,000. You may not get that 9 years to move forward.
Okay.
With regard to the 2016, does that mean it has to be installed 2015 in order to count it for 2016, or can it be installed in 2016?
It can be installed in 2016. That's the final year of the tax credit. December 31st, 2016. Things will change. We just don't know exactly what they'll be.
For those of you that are listening, one of kind of how Sean and I reconnected was because I had him come out to my house and look at my house, and assuming that it was like a real simple thing, and he informed me that the pitch of my roof, right, pitch?
Yes.
Pitch of my roof could affect whether or not I could actually have solar. So could you elaborate a little bit on that,
Sure.
Sean?
So there's a couple of qualifying factors when we go to a customer. Number one is the construction of the home. The pitch is certainly part of that. The shading from any trees or other obstructions like an air conditioner or a chimney, or even a neighbor's house if it's a 2-story and you're looking at a 1-story next door. All of those elements come into play. So with Jason's house, the 45-degree pitch unqualifies it for Solar City. There are probably other companies out there that will install on a 45-degree pitch. But realize the way that system is going to produce is how many sun hours it gets at the azimuth, which is the direction that it's facing, east, south, west, and also the angle of the roof on the pitch. So we've just looked at the safety of putting an individual to install it on a 45-degree pitch, and we don't feel that it's the safest environment or the benefit that you get from a system. There are companies out there that will certainly take your $30,000, put it up there, but it will be getting a little less production because that pitch is pretty severe. Other parts of the world, a 45-degree pitch would be perfect. In fact, there's some places where a 90-degree pitch is actually perfect, but not here in the valley. For us, anything more than about 32, 33 degrees, you start to see a lack of production. When we set our ground mounts, we're setting those at about 15 degrees for maximum production over 12 months on a fixed system. So your house, even though it is beautiful and the roof is fantastic, it's just not a system that would qualify for Solar City, but there might be another company that could do that.
Okay. Gentlemen?
With regard to the ground installation, how much space would you need? So, for example, somebody out in the country that has some property, pretty easy. You can just pick wherever you want to put it.
Sure.
How about lot sizes and that kind of stuff for in town?
Sure, great question. So most of the jurisdictions that we work with, they do have requirements on us being able to put a ground mount. 2 acres or more is typically not a problem. Less than that, we start to see pushback from the inspector, primarily because it's going to have a foundation that's immovable, and unless you've got the space to be able to lock that in, they really don't like us to put a ground mount. And depending on the size of the usage, whatever your bill is, depends how many panels we need to put in as well. But you're right, 2 acres and more, we do a lot of ground mounts, and you've probably seen a lot of the ag areas now starting to install a lot more mini solar farms, if you will. They're using them more for the wells now that there's concern with drought and having to drill deeper to get water. Their pumps are having to work a lot harder. So even though their cost per kilowatt is better than what you and I pay for our home, they're just having to use a lot more usage. So for them, the solar does pay off.
Okay. Question online is, how do I monitor system performance?
Great question. So every customer is going to have access electronically. So they can go on to their computer, they can go onto their iPad, they can go onto their phones.
Oh,
and
cool. I
I will show you real quick what my system looks like. So this is more of a wow factor because you certainly don't need to monitor it. We've got Intel that's doing this 24/7. I don't know if you can see that very well.
Yeah.
But every hour there's a little blip on here, and I can go back and look from the time it was installed up until right now. On rainy and cloudy and foggy days, it will be a little less production, but we know on everybody's zip code how many sun hours we anticipate that system to be producing based on the azimuth, the pitch, and the size of the system. So it's just kind of nice for me to pull out and show folks, hey, this is actually my system making energy, but I'm not responsible for looking at this, so I don't have to look at this and say, oh, it looks like it's working or it's not working. Solar City is pinging my system every 15 minutes, and if it doesn't do what it's supposed to, then they pull up a bigger screen to look and see, is there something going on? Is this a weather pattern? Is there a cloud going over all these homes that we've installed? And if so, then we're not worried about it. But if it's an isolated instance, let's send a service crew out there and see what's going on.
Okay. Sean, I have two questions about roofs.
Sure.
One person has asked, do I have to re-roof my home beforehand? And the other person has asked if it could be installed on all types of roofs.
Great question. You've got a very educated group here. I appreciate that. So most roofs do not need to be re-roofed. However, we cannot install on certain roofs, in which case we would need to re-roof those. Shake is one, which was my home. I wanted to get solar about a decade ago, but the roof was in great shape and it was shake and just didn't want to re-roof to get solar at the time. Once we had that windstorm a couple of years ago, I think I told you, Jason,
yeah,
my shingles got blown off. It was not only time to re-roof, but a perfect time to go solar. So anything that's shake, we cannot do. Anything that is a flat roof, we cannot do. Anything that is a rolled comp, we cannot do. So what we can do is anything metal. We do a lot of corrugated and a lot of seamed metal, a lot of shops, a lot of ag areas, of course. We can do flat or rounded concrete tile, but not the clay tile. And of course we can do the comp shingles, which is predominantly what's being used now for most re-roofs. If somebody has a roof that's maybe borderline, that's a discussion we're going to have with the customer. Looks like your roof is okay for installation now, but probably within that 5 to 10 year time frame, you're probably going to be wanting to re-roof. The neat thing about putting the modules on the roof is it immediately stops the aging process. So provided there weren't any structural issues underneath or dry rot, that roof now is going to stop aging. So the UV rays no longer hit it. The glass refracts all the thermal and the UV back off. But what about the rest of the roof, Sean? We can either remove the outer areas, or we can just go ahead and have the roofer typically just re-roof up to that point. Depends on the system. Every system is a little different.
Okay.
I do have a couple of questions. The technology you're using today, how is the efficiency different than, say, 3 to 5 years ago? What do you anticipate in a couple of years? And then on top of that, what are the life of these panels? So of 10 or 15 years, what maintenance, replacement, how long do they last?
Sure, good question.
Can you repeat the question, because I think the microphone's pointing?
Sure. So the question is kind of a two-part question. How is the technology today different than the technology of just a few years ago? And what is the life expectancy of the equipment and the efficiency of the equipment today moving forward? So yes, every year, in fact sometimes every few months, we see the panels for the same size. 3x5 is pretty standard size for almost all panels. They get a little more efficient. So what we used to get when I first came into the industry almost 4 years ago, 180, 185 watts for that size panel was pretty standard. Now we're up to 265. So a pretty good jump. Part of that jump has been the growth in the industry. A lot more capital has been moved into the industry, of course. China probably owns 80% of the panel market, with the rest of the 20% coming through random parts of the U.S., Europe, Philippines, a lot of other places where they've got cheap labor and probably low requirements and regulations. So for the majority of the infrastructure that's been going in, we've seen a big jump, but that's primarily because of all that cheap money that's been going to it. I don't know that we'll see the same jump over the next 4 years, but we certainly could. The equipment itself is warranted for 25 years. So every panel manufacturer
Discuss that question, by the way, so good timing.
Awesome. It's a standard 25 in the industry. So whether it's a big name company like a Trina or a Canadian Solar or a Yingli or some random company, you're like, I've never heard of them, but I'm sure they're a good company too, all 25 years. As we all know, every warranty is really only as good as that company that's going to be in business to service that warranty. And that's really where you see a difference, not so much in the panel manufacturers, but in the companies that install them and have an agreement to honor it. So with Solar City, we're going to take care of all of our systems for 20 years, whether it's cash, lease, or power purchase agreement. Most companies will be 20 years on the lease and the power purchase agreement, but only 10 years on the cash. So the real difference there is if something happens in year 11 with a cash customer, Solar City is still going to go out there and make good on the inverter, the equipment, anything that went wrong with it. Other individuals, if that company is still in business and they drop ship the panel or the inverter to the customer, then if that original company is still in business, they will charge whatever labor they need to go in there and reinstall the new equipment. Typically, we're looking at a 40 to 50 year lifespan with solar panels. Looking back when Bell Laboratories created those panels back in the 50s, a lot of those panels still up in the atmosphere on satellites, working great, the ones that haven't burned up in the atmosphere, obviously. So we anticipate the panels that are made today, even better materials for manufacturing. So getting 40 to 50 years is not out of the question.
Great. You guys good right now?
I don't think I'll be around.
People are asking about lead times. Someone's chatted in here. He heard 4 to 8 weeks. Others heard 3 to 6 months.
Sure.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
They're both correct?
They are
Great.
both correct. So let's say I go to Jason's house and he is in a county where we can get the permit a couple days, maybe a week tops, and he needs no special work done to his main panel. We can go in there once we meet with Jason and decide which system he likes. We send a site survey team out. They actually do the measurement, take all the photos. That gets uploaded immediately to our design team. They put that information to the permit team that's able to get the permit, and then we put you on the schedule for install. So the quickest that we've seen installs at Solar City is around the 2-week time frame. Eventually, we think that 90–95% of our installs are going to be sub 30 days because we're looking at where it's taking a long time and why it's taking a long time, and really just choosing not to spend the effort there because what might take 6 months on one house, we could do 6 other homes in that same time frame. So from a shareholder standpoint and a customer satisfaction standpoint, it doesn't make sense to make you wait 6 months when there's just going to be so many delays, when I can go take care of 6 other customers and make them happy and have their friends and family go, wow, only took a month and you're saving some good money. I want that too. Versus I go over to Steve's house and he's like, yeah, they said it was going to take 4, maybe 5 months, and it's been another 6 months total. I'm just really not happy with Solar City. So it can take up to 6 months, but that's typically where it requires longer permit time, some of the South Valley, and if there was any kind of main panel upgrade, I had to incorporate into that. Or maybe even a re-roof, like we talked about earlier. Steve had a shake roof, but he totally wants to go solar, he loves the concept, sees the financial benefit, but the re-roof is going to take another 3, 4, 5 weeks. So everything just starts to add on to this time frame. But for the most part, for us, 2 weeks is really on the quick side, but I'm seeing most of our stuff done right now between 30 and 60 days.
Okay. Additional expenses. Are there any at the 7 or 10 year mark? And then they put quote, upgrades in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing here, Mike is not elaborating, but I'm guessing that he means, after so many years, am I going to have to upgrade my equipment,
Sure.
or is there going to be additional expenses? And if so, who covers that?
Sure. So with Solar City, we cover that system entirely for 20 years. So no matter what happens to it, whether it's a panel, an inverter, some random conduit just bent wrong and the wire finally arced itself out and blew some breaker that we had to go replace, 100% of that is on us. And when you look at the system itself, it typically loses about 0.5% of production per year. That's the degradation of all panels. So what I need for electricity today in 2014 is going to be about 10% greater than what I'm going to have 20 years from now. But typically what we see with appliances, washers and dryers, refrigerators and the like, is they get a little more energy efficient with each generation. So in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whenever you need to replace those appliances, they will be needing less electricity. So by that 20-year mark, you'll probably be using roughly the same amount of electricity for your given lifestyle. No additional items are necessary. If anything happens along the way, Solar City repairs it. It's always on our cost. We have everything set up so that we know what that system is supposed to be producing, as you saw in my little app there. So if it doesn't make what it's supposed to, then we refund that back to the customer. So it's always, the risk is always on us to make sure that system is producing properly.
Okay. So 2 like questions here is, who contacts my electric company? Do I have to let them down, and do I ever get a bill again?
We actually file all the documentation for that. It's called interconnection form, and that's when you finally get permission to operate. We abbreviate that PTO. And you will still be getting a bill from your utility company once a year. They send you monthly statements. Those are called NEM, which stands for Net Energy Metering Statements. So every month you'll get a statement that shows how much electricity you consumed from PG&E and how much electricity you sold to PG&E. because now you've got a new meter. That smart meter changes a little bit. It's called an NEM meter. That allows that electricity to flow both directions. So when you've got a great sunny day in April, May, and you're not using a lot of energy, air conditioner's not on yet, you're sending a lot of that juice back into PG&E, and they're sending it to wherever they need to, neighbors, local businesses, whatever. So every month you'll see that statement, and some months it may be $50, and some months it may be negative $50, just depends on the month. But over 12 months, that's your true-up bill. That's typically what you'll hear from customers. I got my true-up bill, and they either love it or they don't love it. The reason they don't love it is either because the system wasn't designed large enough to offset enough of their usage, so they jumped back into the higher tiers, or they weren't educated on how solar works and they thought they now had unlimited energy at a cheaper price, and they started turning their thermostat down to 64 degrees instead of 82 like they had it the year before, thus consuming a lot more energy. So that true-up is always something we want to educate the customer. You will get a bill from PG&E. Even if you gave back more than you took, you're going to have a little credit. It's not worth us designing the system larger because PG&E is not going to buy electricity from you for more than they could buy it from themselves on a natural gas plant or someplace else, hydroelectric and like.
Okay. Someone's asked to say, true or false? Solar will get more efficient. Shouldn't I wait? That's really a true or false question.
We'll address that in 2 parts. So yes, it will get more efficient. Like Steve had asked, will the panels be better in 10 years? Yeah. Absolutely. For that same 3x5 footprint, it will be producing more wattage. It will become more efficient. Should you wait is always the question. If it's going to get better, wouldn't it be better to wait? You can never catch up. So let's say that I bought a system 10 years ago, and it was a really old system. Obviously, looking at the wattage that we got from panels back then versus now, nowhere in comparison. But if I bought that system 10 years ago, I'd have zero bill today. Its payback time roughly would have been about a decade. So now moving forward, whatever it's making me is free electricity, provided I don't use more than that and need to jump back onto the grid with PG&E. So really, the longer you wait, the more you're just really paying higher prices, waiting for that energy to catch up. And it never does. It's never going to get so efficient that you need a panel the size of a phone to place on your roof that gives you 100% of your energy, because this would cost an unbelievable amount of money compared to your average system probably running $20,000, $25,000.
Okay. I am out of questions here. Gentlemen, do you have anything?
Talking about, you mentioned the fact that PG&E won't continuously buy it, obviously, because it's just too expensive for them. So does that eliminate the possibility for somebody with like 5 acres to put like a mini solar farm out there?
Great question. So this is kind of the urban myth, right? This is the legend you hear about. I heard about this guy. He was growing almonds and pistachios, but he cut all his trees down so he could put in solar and sell it back to PG&E. PG&E used to allow what's called a feed-in tariff, but this was a long time ago, back when they were just experimenting with solar, and like a lot of companies, when they experiment with something, they don't have a lot of rules yet. So they did allow people to build these systems and buy the electricity from them at a predetermined rate. But going back, if there wasn't a rebate or a substantial rebate in tax credit, the price per kilowatt was still much more expensive than what they could get from their Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, any of their gas plants, or their hydroelectric plants. So it was really just a way for them to test the market. So once they decided there was no way that that could be efficient enough for them, they stopped all the feed-in tariffs. So there's no more feed-in tariffs. But we continue to get these phone calls every now and then. I've got 5 acres. I've got 10 acres. And it's hard to let them down because, you know, you really want to help these folks. They've heard the stories, and it sounds too good to be true because it really is. It doesn't exist.
But they would have enough land to basically wipe out their own electricity.
Absolutely. If they wanted to do a ground mount, we could certainly look at what their usage is, build a design to offset their consumption. That would work out perfect. And PG&E does want that, just not over 100%. Once you get over 100%, they want a load justification, which sometimes is warranted. I'm going to build a shop. It's going to have a welder. I'm going to have my in-laws move in. They're going to be using a lot more electricity, things like that. That's okay.
Okay, do architectural plans need to be submitted to planning and development to get solar systems installed? This is from Shannon.
Sure.
Has that approval process been smooth, and have there been many bumps in the road?
That's actually very smooth. Once we get the site survey information, it's immediately uploaded to our design team, and they print out the plans, and then we have a permit runner that actually runs to that jurisdiction to submit them. Most of our permit runners know all the jurisdictions, so they already know what questions might arise. We have no issues there. There's a very slight bump in the road when we have homeowners association. So let's say there's a homeowners association and they meet once a month, and we have to submit those drawings, and we can actually do a Photoshop showing what that customer's house looks like with the panels, and honestly it's like 99% accurate. If you saw the Photoshop and then you saw a photo after it was installed, you'd have a really hard time distinguishing between the two, so it's very accurate. But homeowners associations can't stop you from getting solar, but they can ask you to submit what it's going to look like just so they can stamp it and approve it. Now, if there is another area on the home that isn't greater than a 20% reduction, we can go ahead and move it to another section if the homeowner does request. So let's say you've got an east and a west-facing roof that will both work perfect, and you want it on the east, it happens to be the front of the house, and the homeowners association says, we prefer you put it on the west. All things being equal, and you're going to get the same production, they can go ahead and ask us to put it on the other side. But let's say there's some trees back there, and now it's going to be 75% as efficient as the front. Now, they can't make you do it because that would be greater than the 20%. So there's a lot of different rules with the homeowners association, but we have very few issues with them, and we have none with all the jurisdictions.
Great. Sean, I've got actually a few more questions here. I didn't see one of the questioning streams. Are you okay on time?
Oh, yeah.
Great. Generally, what types of commercial properties have you installed solar systems? Warehouses, retail, offices? Are there energy savings similar to residential properties?
Great question. So we've done all the Walmarts in California, a couple of the big buildings over in Silicon Valley. Those are friends of Elon's, the Intels, the Googles, the eBays. We typically don't do a lot of what I would call small commercial. So like this building, as much as I'm sure it uses a fair amount of electricity, isn't really our sweet spot. You know, we focus on residential, and we focus on really large industrial. We just finished Visalia Unified. We've got a ribbon cutting ceremony this Friday down there. We also have the Solar Strong project. You may not have heard of that. The government didn't do a real great job of talking about that. But it's a $1 billion project over the next 4 years where Solar City's putting solar on all of the residential housing on all the U.S. bases throughout the world. So we actually ship panels and inverters and our crew out to different places. So it's very exciting for us. We love what we're doing. We try and hire as many veterans for those projects as we can as well. So it's really it's a win-win for both of us. Excellent.
Okay. Yeah, this one kind of touches upon an earlier question that you already answered, but he says, and thank you, Shannon, for this. You may have discussed this already, but will the tax credits differ for residential properties versus commercial properties?
No, right now they're both 30% tax credit. In year 2016, the commercial is going to stay at 10%, and the residential is unknown. That is a question mark. It could go to 10% if Congress allows it, or it could disappear entirely. We do not know.
And we answered that one, so great. Perfect timing, because I'm out of questions.
Back to your comments about the location on a roof, whether it's a homeowner association or whatever. It was actually out in the street the other day, and one of my neighbors was thinking about it. He's got a shake roof, and knows that needs to be replaced. The home was built 20 years ago. But really, the only location efficient with roof space is south, which is the front of the house.
Yes.
We've got a homeowner association. And we were talking about the west side. He's still got plenty of roof over there, but the neighbor's got a bunch of redwoods that are blocking all the sun. So if you were going to put it on the west, can you ask or have the neighbor cut the trees down? And let's say it's a prospective home buyer, and he asks you that question, put it in terms of real estate. And is he allowed to do that, and what are the options regarding the trees, or if they're young trees and they grow up and they block it, or if they're there now, can they have them taken out?
Sure.
What's the policy? What's the law on that, I guess it would be?
It is. Great question. So let's address that in two parts. The first part was actually covered in the 2006 Solar Bill of Rights. California passed this huge solar bill, and they said if your neighbor has trees that prevent you from getting the solar sun necessary for your system, you can go ahead and remove them at your cost, but they cannot stop you from removing those trees.
Wow.
$200.
Yeah.
Now
That's
here's
surprising.
Now here's going to be
Full disclosure here, we've got an attorney in our midst.
but now here's going to be the flip side to that. We do have a secondary mounting point. We have another roof that we can use. That's the south side. So the west wouldn't be the only location. Since there is another location where those trees wouldn't impact it, then no court is going to say, I'm going to cut down those trees just so you don't have to have them on the front of your house.
It is the front of the house, right at the street.
Oh, yeah.
So the homeowners association, I think,
So
they probably couldn't.
they always do this. They always go, is that the only place they go? Like they always kind of like cringe a little bit. And I'll be honest, 50% of my homeowners would prefer that they never see them. Right? Put them on the back, put them on the side, don't put them on the front. The other 50% either don't care or they actually want them on the front because they're going solar and they want everyone to know they're going solar. So let's address the 50% that don't want them on the front. If they don't want them on the front, in a situation like that where even though there is a secondary mounting plane, nobody's going to allow the trees to be cut down unless you approach your neighbor and said, hey, I noticed you've got some trees there that are looking a little tall and they might fall over on one of our houses. I'm thinking about getting solar. How about I pay to have those removed? Is that good with you? So as a good neighbor, you can do the handshake and take those out, and then you can use the west side. But you wouldn't be able to force that neighbor to remove them if you had another mounting plane. That make sense? Yeah. As far as trees growing, so it's in our agreement, as I'm sure most other solar companies' agreements as well. When we design a system, it's based on the trees the way they are now. So if you go out there and plant a redwood, and in 25 years it becomes a 60-foot redwood, blocking most of the production, we're going to be a little upset with that if it was based on us charging you by how much energy it produced. But now let's say it was a cash system, that just impacts you because now you're not getting the solar production you initially paid for. So we'll have to educate you on how you take care of those existing trees as well as new trees that could come into play.
Wonderful. You gentlemen, anything else?
$1 million question.
$1 million question.
You tell me the amount of the question, but I'm going to have a buyer that comes in and says, you know, I've got a 2,000 square foot house, like every other house in this neighborhood. How much is it going to cost me to buy the solar system?
Sure. That definitely is a good question. I think that when more people get educated on how systems actually work, you know, a company like ours, think of us like that utility company that you wish you could compete against PG&E. You know, you get that bill in August, you open it up, it's several hundred, sometimes more than several $100s, and you're like, I wish there was another company I could switch over to. That's really what Solar City does. We think of ourselves as that secondary energy company, because all we're doing is taking what you have now, selling it to you at a lower price, and fixing that cost for at least 20 years, sometimes longer, depending if the customer wants to have an additional 10-year agreement added on to that after the 20 years. That's their choice. So if you look in terms of a utility company, then it doesn't really matter what size we have to put up there. It's really what that customer uses. Also, depending how that customer's home is set up. Some homes, obviously like Jason's, the pitch isn't really working for us, so we wouldn't be able to do anything on his, but there might be some other homes where they've got some azimuth concerns, the shading concerns. So you having a perfect 2,000 square foot rectangle that faces south, and that's the back of your house, we've got unlimited mounting plane space, and so we'll put whatever it takes to offset 100%. We come over to Steve's house, exact same model in your development, but he's faced 90 degrees, so now we've got more of an east-west. We're going to get different production from his system than we would from yours. He might need an additional 5–10% more panels to get the same amount of energy you're getting. No fault of Steve's builder or no fault of Steve's home, it's just the direction it was facing. So every home is truly unique. That's why it is great to have a solar professional be able to help you out. Sometimes they can do it online, sometimes they can just stop by for a few minutes and tell you exactly what the system is going to require. Typically, though, that usage is 100% of what we're working off of. Because you could have two identical homes, even in the neighborhood, facing the exact same way, but your family likes to keep the home at 68 degrees, and you like to keep it at 82, so at the end of the year, there's going to be a substantial usage difference there.
What do you have to do, let's say on annual maintenance, just for cleaning, and let's say there's redwoods there, so you're getting sap on there, so the dust and accumulation tends to, does that affect the efficiency? You just go up there with a hose, or do you got to go up and clean them? Do you guys come out and do that?
Great question. So we have been known to clean our systems if there's a reason to. Historically, obviously, we've been having a really dry season, and it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing an abnormal amount of rain. But usually the rain and the wind that we get here in the valley is more than enough to keep the majority of the pollen and the dust off of it. You'd be surprised looking at two systems, one with no pollen, no dirt, no dust, and the one next to it that looks very dusty. There's not a substantial amount of production difference because those rays that are hitting it are actually going through to the cell. Think of like going outside and getting a tan or a sunburn. You know, you stick your arm out there, and yeah, if it's a little cloudy, you might think you'd get less sun or less of a tan, but you're probably going to actually get more. It's radiated the exact same way for those panels. We will usually recommend to our customers if they feel like it's getting dusty, dirty, early in the morning when it's still cool, if they're able to on a single-story house. I wouldn't recommend this on a two-story. But if they want to just hose it off with their hose, that's usually enough to remove that residue, and then they look like they did when they were clean again. We have been known to have to go out and clean if the app tells me that it's not getting what it's producing, and I send the service truck out, and everything's working great, but he noticed maybe there's a little biological from some birds, we might have to go up there and clean that off. And that's always on us.
Biological from some birds.
Organic.
Anything else? Anything you want to share more about?
You bet. Yeah, so one of the great reasons that we wanted to come by and share what we do with,
this is the incentive thing, right?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
I almost forgot.
With all of the great realtors here in town is Solar City has a partnership that we call our network partner, and every single individual is able to become a network partner. So you don't have to be a customer to be a network partner. Customers are automatically enrolled, but anybody that wants to be a network partner, we just send an email out, you put in a little bit of information, and then you get a PURL. Those of you that are tech savvy, that's basically your personal address. So if somebody clicks on that link, it looks like a regular Solar City webpage, but deep behind in the code, it says it's Steve Wynn's, or it's Jason Ferris's, or it's Sean Smith's. So when the customer wants to get a little solar information, they fill it out, and they send one of our energy consultants out, and they qualify and they move forward. Solar City mails you a $250 referral fee for saying thank you for sending that person out, which from a real estate standpoint, you meet with many great people. I'm sure they have lots of questions about not just their home, but energy efficiency. So it seems like a really good relationship for us to be able to share with Guarantee and all the people you work with.
Wonderful. Great program. And then we can, if you're listening here as an agent and you've got a web page, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to overstep, but you could probably put a landing page with this information, or if you write a blog post about some of the information you learned this evening, or from some of the information that Sean will leave here for us, you can put that on your blog and link it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or if you do email blasts, we do a lot of that. Because we get customers that maybe this year wasn't their year to go solar for whatever reason. They're still testing the technology waters, waiting for that next big thing to come next year. But then they get a few of those $400, $500, $600 bills, and they're like, I'm going to call Sean again. I'm going to take another look at that. And then they decide 6 months later or 18 months later they decide to go solar. So we're constantly sending out emails with new information and ways for us to reconnect with those customers, as I'm sure a lot of the real estate market does as well. So you can put that link in your email, and they can see that, and the minute they click it, it's opening up your PURL. So it makes it super simple for you to reach your customers without having to, blog them, spam them, send stuff that they may not be interested in. But if they're opening your email, they obviously want to know more about what you're telling them.
Wonderful. And let me just double check. We have no more questions. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Got two more. When a building has also been designed and built using green building standards, i.e. LEED Gold,
yes,
and you guys also install a solar panel farm, are those energy savings even more dramatic than a conventional building?
So all of the LEED buildings are designed for certain standards. Title 24 is what most of the homes post-1992 are held to, but LEED is another generation even beyond that. And I could even ask Misha to give a little bit more information on that. You want to throw a little bit more information about how LEED is even greater than Title 24?
Yeah.
You can just you can get on camera if you want.
No, that's fine.
Oh, maybe everyone wants.
So LEED, for anyone who's familiar with it, LEED has several tiers. It can be LEED Gold, LEED Platinum, depending on a whole bunch of different circumstances about the building. And with that, solar definitely does apply. It will depend on the amount of energy that you're offsetting as far as what it would apply to, but you do, to have a LEED certified building, you definitely need to hit energy efficiency standards in a whole bunch of areas, sustainability with building materials, but solar would factor into that for sure. They probably have certain bars that you have to, that you have to hit in order for the solar offset to count towards the LEED, though.
All right, thank you, Misha. And lastly, we'll end it with this question here. It's a specific location. It says, I recall your solar panel farm next to Universalist Church over on Cedar and Alluvial, and was wondering about those types of energy savings.
Sure, so that was a very unique project that we were participating in. And all of those homes were LEED certified, if I recall. And I don't know what level they were LEED certified, but whenever you have extra energy efficiency, whether it's more insulation or better windows to seal up all of your cracks, you're going to require less energy for a lifestyle that was comparable to a home built maybe 35, 40 years ago. So it will require a lot less. So kind of back to Steve's question, we won't need as many panels. So what might have taken 30 panels 15, 20 years ago, that home may only require 14 panels for the same lifestyle because everything is so much more efficient. The air conditioning, the heating, the refrigerator, the LED TV, the LED bulbs, everything requires less energy for that same lifestyle, so you don't need as much solar energy provided.
Wonderful. Okay, this is it, last chance. The Google's going to broadcast me off. So thank you very much to Sean Smith and Misha for coming on out from Solar City. You can find more information from them at their website, Fresyes.com.
Correct.
Correct. And then locally, their information will be here in our office, Guaranteed Fig Garden.